All right, so yesterday we did 1 and 2 on this. 3 is your right triangle trig word problems. So it says to find the height of the tree if the length of the shadow is 50 feet when the sun's at a 30-degree angle. And then it actually gives you the diagram. Those things are measured. But again, remember that, like quiz-wise, you're not going to get a picture. On the review, there's questions without a picture. You want to make sure you practice those, okay, and understand. So this time you can actually solve this without a calculator. We'll talk about the difference between them, and then I'll show you what it would be if you did have the calculator. For these quiz questions, you'll have the calculator the whole time, but some will be say, keep exact, and those you obviously want to keep exact and not use the calculator to round them. And then the word problems, it will say like round to the nearest tenth or round to the nearest degree, whatever it is. So this one, what I'm looking for is the height of the tree, which would be the h in this diagram. What trig function do I use? Tangent. I would say the tangent of 30 degrees equals h over 50. And then the values in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply that 50 times both sides. So without a calculator, you can do these questions that are based on your special angles, meaning 30 or 60 or 45, right? In a 30, 60, 90 triangle, so you can either set that up or you can use your unit circle. At 30 degrees, which is your pi over 6, what's your coordinate point there? Good. So if I'm talking about the tangent here, we also learned those, right? What's the tangent at the over 6? Square root 3 over 3. Thanks, Alex. So that is this value. 50 times root 3 over 3 equals h. And I would just multiply that straight out. I'd get 50 square root 3 over 3. So if it had asked for the answer to be kept exact, it would be that, okay? The angles that are on this part of your quiz are not your special angles. Obviously, you need those for the other stuff. So I would literally use the calculator just to type this in, and I would make sure my calculator's in what mode? Degrees. Good. 50 times the tangent of 30 gives me 28.86. So we're going to round this to the nearest tenth. You'll just do whatever it says to do on the quiz, but we're going to, for now, round it to the nearest tenth. Good morning. Thank you. Which would be 28.9 degrees. Not degrees, 28.9 feet. Sorry, it's not an angle, it's a side. Questions on this or homework questions? What you need to know for your quiz. Yeah. Quiz is tomorrow. It's going to cover 4.1 to 4.3. You do need a calculator. Like the whole front side, you don't need the calculator for, and you have to keep those answers exact, so you want to be careful and not use it when you shouldn't. And then on the back, there's going to be the questions that require the calculator. So we started with 4.1, which was all the basics, right? So we did how to go from degrees to radians, and then back radians to degrees. So we're converting. For degrees to radians, we do the angle times pi over 180. For radians to degrees, we do the angle times 180 over pi. So it's going to say convert your angle from degrees to radians or vice versa. You've got to know if it's in degrees or radians based on what's there. How do you know the difference if it's in degrees or radians? The degrees has to have the degree symbol. Good, okay? The radians do not have to have pi. Then we did coterminal angles. So if it's in degrees, and we want to find a coterminal, we just add or subtract 360 degrees. If it's negative and we want a positive one, we're going to add. If it's so far negative that you have to add again, remember you have to add again. So your positive should be positive, your negative should be negative. If it's in radians, we add and subtract 2 pi because that's the equivalent of 360 degrees. And same thing here. If you add 2 pi and it's still negative, you have to add 2 pi again. Also in this section were complements and supplements. So in degrees, if it's a complement, we do 90 minus theta. If it's in radians, we do pi over 2 minus theta. For supplements, if it's in degrees, we do 180 minus theta. If it's in radians, pi minus theta. And remember, these cannot be negative. So if it is bigger than 90, there is no complement. And if it is bigger than 180, there is no supplement. You would literally write the word none. And then also in this section was arc length. And this is SOR. S equals theta times your radius. And theta must be in what? Good, radians. So if I give it to you in degrees, you're going to convert it to radians and then multiply it times the radius. All of that is exact. Like, none of that requires a calculator. We started the foundations of graphing angles in this, but most of that happened in 4.2. So obviously you want to know your unit circle. It was 0. At the top is 90, which is the same thing as pi over 2. On the left, 180. Same thing as pi. On the bottom, 270. Same thing as 3 pi over 2. And then we doubled back around, which was 360 or 2 pi. And we did all students take calculus to help us remember what's positive in each quadrant from our original 3. So in the first quadrant, everything is positive. In the second quadrant, sine and its reciprocal function, which would be cosecant, are positive. Everything else is negative. In the third quadrant, tangent and its reciprocal function, cotangent, are positive. Everything else is negative. And in the fourth quadrant, cosine and secant are positive. Everything else is negative. So you need to know 2 things about this. One is the location of where an angle would be if I gave you something that is not on your unit circle, because it won't be. Okay, it's going to be coterminal. And then also what the coordinate points are for that. So remember, every over 6 has the coordinate point root 3 over 2 and 1/2. The positive negative signs change, but every over 6 is that. Every over 4 is root 2 over 2 and root 2 over 2. And every over 3 is 1/2 and root 3 over 2. The x's are the cosines, the y's are the sines, and we even went a step further and added in the tangents. The tangent for an over 6 is root 3 over 3. The tangent for an over 4 is 1, and the tangent for an over 3 is root 3. So if I gave you something that was an improper fraction that's bigger than 2 pi or less than 2 pi, because remember, if it's positive, we go counterclockwise, but if it's negative, we go clockwise. So if I said negative 22 pi over 3, actually, let's do positive first. 22 pi over 3, I'm going to convert that into a mixed number. What is 22 over 3 in mixed number form? 7 and 1/3 pi, or 7 and pi over 3. The trick, remember, is that the evens are on the right, the odds are on the left. Because the whole number part of this is odd, I would start on my left. It's positive, so I go counterclockwise. The second part is asking, is this less than 1/2 or bigger than 1/2? So is it less than 1/2 or bigger than 1/2? Is 1/3 less than 1/2 or bigger than 1/2? Less than, which means it's in that first quadrant after the odd start. So I know it's this over 3, which tells me my coordinate points and trig functions are those. And if it's in the third quadrant, tangent and cotangent are positive. All others are negative. If it was 23 pi over 3, this would be 7 2/3 pi. I would still start on the odd side, but now 2/3 is bigger than a half, so I go past the halfway mark, and that puts me in the fourth quadrant, where now my cosine and my secant are positive, and then all others are negative. So if you just knew this and the quadrant ones, right, the 1, 0, 0, 1, -1, 0, and 0, -1, that's going to even get you some partial credit. If you get the sign wrong, but you have the trig function right, I will give you partial credit. So if you just knew those, that should be enough to look at a question and know what the values are. Obviously, you want to know that positive and negative so you don't get any points taken off. But your question is going to be coterminal, so you want to make sure you know how to find them. They're not going to be just on your unit circle. Any other questions from the unit circle application of that unit circle? Even and odd, we're also in this section. Even, odd functions. Remember, we said even is just cosine and secant. Odd is all the others. Sine, cosecant, tangent, and cotangent. What does even and odd mean? What does that determine? Don't all yell at me at once. You guys are super obnoxious. What does it mean to be even? Yeah.
If the angle is negative, then cosine and secant don't change their
Good.
sign.
Good. So if I said that let me just say that the cosine of theta is, let's just say it's 3/5, okay? The cosine of negative theta is not going to change. It's going to stay 3/5. The cosecant, the secant would not change either. But if I give you the sine of theta was 3/5, and I asked for the sine of negative theta, now my sign, as in the positive negative sign, changes. So the evens are the ones that do not change. The odds are the ones that do change. Okay, and then in this section you also had finding trig functions when given a coordinate point, not on your unit circle. So you'll see, like on your review, you get something. Let's just say this is 2, 3. Okay, we'll make it nice and easy for now, but you'll see it's a little bit different on your quiz. So if I have those two measurements, right? Here's my x and here's my y, and I wanted to find the sine, the cosine, the tangent, the cosecant, the secant, and the cotangent. Then remember, the sine is the y, the cosine is the x, the tangent is the y over the x. And then we just flip them to get the other ones. So the sine would be 3, the cosecant would be 1/3. The cosine would be 2, the secant would be 1/2. The tangent would be 3/2, and the cotangent would be 2/3. There is going to be square roots in these, so you're going to have to rationalize, you're going to have to simplify, that kind of stuff. Questions on those? Okay, then came 4, 3. And the foundation of that is the word Sokatoa. So now we used our right triangles to set stuff up. You're either going to have a right triangle where you have to find like a third side and then find your trig functions using Sokatoa. Okay. You can also have your special right triangles. So you've got your 30, 60, 90 triangle. Where it would be x times root 3 and 2x. And your 45, 45, 90 triangle, where it would be 45, 45, 90, x, x, and x root 2. So if it's not in your unit circle, you would use those ratios. If it is in your unit circle, then x becomes 1 in these. So it would be 1, root 3, and 2, and 1, 1, and root 2. We saw our co-functions in this section. So the sine of theta is the same thing as the cosine of 90 minus theta. And the reverse of that, the cosine of theta is the same thing as the sine of 90 minus theta. Secant goes with cosecant. And tangent goes with cotangent. So if I gave you like the secant of 15 degrees and I asked for a cofunction with the same value, it would be what? Good. So cosecant of 90 minus 15, which is? What's 90 minus 15? Okay. Borrow the 1. Whoa, guys, we're moving slow this morning. So you've got to use the match of the cofunction pairings with the complement. So if it's in degrees, it's 90 minus that angle. If it was in radians, then all of those 90s get replaced with 2 pi. You had all the right triangles here, so you could have a right triangle where you got to solve the triangle. Remember, that means solve for all the missing angles, all the missing sides. Okay, those obviously require your calculator. So the calculator-based questions, and it says it on the review, are your solving right triangle, when the angles are not special angles. So this is when they're not 30, 60, 90, or 45, 45, 90. The ones that say stuff like find the secant of 37 degrees. So if it's not something that's on your unit circle, obviously you'd use a calculator here. This would be 1 over the cosine of 37 degrees. Be prepared to see degree, minute, second notation here, and also to see radians here. So if it said cotangent of 7.5, is that in degrees or radians? That's radians. So it'd be 1 over tangent of 7.5, but this would be in radians. So you're going to have to flip-flop between the two modes. Make sure you're comfortable doing that. So like just to test out your calculator if you want to. The mode for the first one should be in degrees. It would be 1 divided by the cosine of 37. And this is 1.2521. 1, and then I have to switch the mode to radians. 1 divided by tangent of 7.5. And this is 0.25. 1.3695. Oh, that format on your quiz got really yucky. Okay, questions and then the word problems are obviously in this section. Questions as far as expectations on your quiz review? Yeah. Of the cofunctions? Sure. So if I gave you tangent of 32 degrees, you're looking for a cofunction with the same value. That would give you the same answer. So tangent goes with cotangent, and then you find the complement, 90 minus 32 degrees. So that'd be the cotangent of 58 degrees.
And that's your answer.
Yep. And if I gave it to you in radians, like let's say this says pi over 5, then it would still be cotangent, but now I'd be doing pi over 2 minus pi over 5. You'd have to give them a like denominator. Good morning. So this would be cotangent of 3 pi over 10. So there's two parts to that cofunction. The one is what pair goes with what. Sine goes with cosine, secant goes with cosecant, tangent goes with cotangent. And then the second part is finding the complement. So if it's in degrees, it's 90 minus that angle. If it's in radians, it's pi over 2 minus that angle. You're welcome. All right, so 5 says Jack standing on the top of a cliff, 305 feet above the lake. The measurement of the angle of depression to the boat on the lake is 42 degrees. How far is the boat from Jack? So if they had, because you'll see these in two different ways. One where they'll give you the height of Jack, and so that you've got to add that on. In this case, they didn't give you the height of Jack, right? So if they had in here said Jack is 4 feet, then I would make sure I would add that on. Now this whole height is 309. The angle of depression, remember, is his eye level down to the boat. So the angle of depression is here. Then it says how far from the boat, how far is the boat from Jack? That's why this is your X, that diagonal. If it said how far is the boat from the base of the cliff, now I'm looking for that bottom measurement. So you just got to be careful as to what it's looking for. So in this case, again, they didn't give you that height. We're just going to use the height of the cliff, which is 305. And then if this is 42, you can do this two different ways. This would also be 42 because those are alternate interior angles. And then you can use the bottom triangle, and I can use the 305. The X is what we're looking for, and the 42. And then that would be sine. The sine of 42 would equal 305 over X. And then 305 divided by the sine of 42 is going to get you the answer. The other way to do it is the way that it's drawn here is that these two angles, the angle of depression and then the angle that forms the triangle we usually find, are complements. So I could take the 42 and subtract it from 90 to get the 48 inside that triangle. And then I can use that. The 48 would be here. The 305 would be here. And I'm looking for X here. This time it's going to be cosine because it's adjacent and hypotenuse. So the cosine of 48 would equal 305 over X, and then I would do 305 divided by the cosine of 48. So you could set it up either way, okay? Usually they will give you that height, so you just got to remember to add that on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on the homework? Let's say it's negative 2 pi over 3. I can find where that's positive, which would be here, and then fold it like a hamburger in your head, and that would be the negative angle. The other way to do it is to just move in the clockwise direction instead of the counterclockwise. That's bigger than a half but less than 1, so I know it falls in that third quadrant. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if it was like negative 11 pi over 3, I'm going to convert that into a mixed number. This would be 3 2/3 pi, but it's negative. So the even and odd start is the same location, whether it's even or whether it's positive or negative. I would start at the odd side, right? But instead of moving in my counterclockwise position this way, like I normally do, I move the other direction. So I would go to negative 2/3 would be actually in that first quadrant. Any other questions based on what came up on the Quizlet or your quiz review?